I want to talk about mouthwashing. Not the act of washing your mouth, but the video game, the horror video game that released recently that has made a splash in a lot of horror communities. It's a wonderful video game, very nuanced, very thoughtful, very disturbing in a lot of ways. It's a horror video game. Even just the visuals are very disturbing, but the themes are as well. But it is very well written. It is a brilliant story. It is a brilliant take on the themes that it does. But there's been a lot of capital D discourse about how it's being interpreted by people, and I do want to throw my hat into the ring just a little bit because I have seen a lot of accusations that people don't fully understand the themes of mouthwashing, but I don't think that's really true. And the reason these accusations are being thrown around is because people are making funny, silly, cutesy art of this horrific video game. There's merch that's kind of silly. There's just like funny little things that people are enjoying mouthwashing in a way that one would consider inappropriate for the themes. Now, just to clarify, mouthwashing is a horror game, non-chronological or like split chronological, where you play as a character who is stuck with other characters in a spaceship that has had a severe malfunction. And basically, while waiting for rescue, although realizing that they cannot be rescued, they have to stay in the spaceship, stuck there and surviving around this sort of tension in which you're not entirely sure what the dynamic is, but you can tell that there's a lot of discomfort, there's a lot of like fear, there's a lot of just like, and there's sort of a mystery around the captain who seems to have crashed the ship in the first place. Now, the themes in question are myriad, but the one that people latch on to is the major one, which is that the main character that you play as you kind of search through the story of mouthwashing, is a rapist. And not only is he a rapist, he is in close quarters with a woman that he raped. And as we go through the story, there is some focus put on the captain, who is now very mangled. He has almost died from his injuries because he seems to have crashed the ship, at least from what we know at the beginning of the story. He seems to have been the one who crashed the ship and caused basically everyone to slowly but surely die on that ship, because even though they're waiting for rescue, it is very likely that they won't be rescued. And the reason there is focus placed on that injured captain, whose name is Curly, is because it is slowly revealed through the story that he was aware of the rape and he doesn't really do anything about it. There's much more to the story. You'd have to like play it or like watch, I guess, like someone who like breaks down the story. But the reason people are very up in arms about people making fan art and stuff like that, generally people aren't making fan art of the rapist, so that's one thing. But the other thing is that they do make fan art of Curly, because not only is Curly the most like visually interesting character he is kind of like the face of the game, but also because he is not immediately as apparent as like the villain of the story. Like the villain of the story is Jimmy, the main character, but Curly is somewhere in a much more like nuanced position. Now, there are accusations that people who make fun and silly art concerning mouthwashing are not taking the theme seriously, but I have to push back against that assumption. Because with a lot of deep and thoughtful and thought-provoking art, people interpret it in different ways, and people create in different ways. And people will not always have the same reaction to something as you do. Like, I can react to certain like horror stories and laugh about it because I think that there are certain aspects of it that are genuinely funny, or just like clever, or just like something I've never seen before. And I'm delighted to see a story that's like so unique. I feel blessed to hear a story that is horrific, but also like from a creative and thoughtful person. I love listening to horror stories, but a lot of people would just react with horror. And that's because we're all different people. That's because we all have like different reactions to things. And I feel like the people who are complaining about how people who make fun little silly things concerning mouthwashing are missing the point are themselves missing the point. I think they don't realize that people are very unique. People have very different reactions to things. People will not react to trauma in the same way, and they will certainly take different things from the same story. I don't think that having fun with a video game necessarily means that they don't understand the gravity of the themes. And, this may not be true throughout everything. That's the point. I'm not generalizing people. Just because somebody's making a curly keychain or somebody's making a joke about events of mouthwashing does not mean they don't understand the themes. Because you do not know other people as well as you know yourself. It doesn't mean that people who don't react exactly the way you do are morally bankrupt. They have different reactions to things. They have different responses to things. And in a lot of cases, they may understand the themes much better than you do because you don't know their experiences. You don't know people. You don't know what people have gone through. Somebody who is making jokes about a certain trauma may have experienced that trauma themselves. And so what ends up happening is that all of these memes, all of these jokes, all of these lighthearted little gabs and like jabs about mouthwashing are seen as reducing the story in some way. But then that interpretation reduces people to this idea of them that you have. You think that they are diminishing the story, but in fact they are just interpreting it, transforming it, and creating based on their own artistic expression. So, all that to say, I think that this accusation that people don't understand mouthwashing just because they are doing something fun with it is so thoughtless. It's so self-centered in certain ways. It like kind of puts your ego above the concept that people might be different from you. And I know this for a fact because I have friends who have experienced sexual assault. They love to joke about mouthwashing. You know, it's like you respond differently to things. Like, I have friends who experience sexual assault and they are like deeply sexual, and other friends who are like sex repulsed. It's like everyone has different responses to traumatic and horrific things. But instead of understanding that, even in the context of a video game, there's this accusation that people just don't get it. They don't get it because they're having fun with it. And I'm sorry, that's just incorrect. And I want to make that clear because I do love mouthwashing. I certainly, in general, I have a discomfort around certain media in which sexual assault is depicted. And that's just a personal thing. I don't think that media shouldn't exist. And I certainly don't think that media that makes me uncomfortable shouldn't exist. I think that, in general, artistic expression can surprise me, can shock me, can even like make me uncomfortable, and that's fine. I think if somebody has something very important to say, it's important to listen to them. But at the same time, I think if someone's just having a jolly old good time joking about something that other people would consider serious, I think you have to understand that like people are different and you don't know what they've gone through, and you don't know the joke, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I try not to like immediately judge people just for like making a fun little, I don't know, like fun little bit of art of characters from a game where you play as a rapist. Like, that's the other thing. Like, people are so judgmental about like, oh, having little fun times and like, you know, like the little fan arts of characters from the rapist game. Like, just the fact you think you have a moral high ground over people who played the same game you did, or at least like understood the story the same way you did, but do something different with it. Like, let's just get out of our head for a sec. Let's just understand that maybe some people didn't get it, but that's not going to be the reality for a lot of people who get it, but just don't react the same way you do. And that's my thought about mouthwashing. It's a creepy game. It's a good game. I like it a lot. It's not very mechanically interesting, but it is very thematically and narratively interesting. And I'm glad that it got such a big following because it deserves that. It's an indie game and it deserves the coverage that it's gotten. And I hope it's doing well. So